They told her first class isn't for people like you. Then she pulled out her SIP status. Ever felt the sting of being told you don't belong? That icy moment when someone looks you up and down, dismissing everything you've fought for, everything you've earned, because of the color of your skin or the assumptions they've made about it. This is the story of Ebony Brown, a determined woman on a seemingly ordinary trip from JFK to Los Angeles that transformed into a showdown of prejudice, courage, and ultimate triumph. When a gate agent hissed, "First class isn't for people like you," Ebony refused to cower. She had something powerful in her back pocket, something that would make them all rethink who truly belonged where. Ebony Brown had always been told she was too ambitious for her own good. Growing up in a single-parent home in Brooklyn, New York, she had watched her mother juggle 3 jobs to keep the lights on and groceries in the fridge. From a young age, Ebony had been keenly aware of 2 things. First, that she was a black girl in a world that seemed ready to judge her at every turn. Second, that she had within her an unquenchable fire that refused to be extinguished by low expectations. That dual awareness shaped her into someone both cautious and fearless. She learned to read people's intentions from their body language and learned to carry herself with a quiet dignity. Even when she wasn't so sure, she felt dignified inside. By the age of 30, Ebony had carved out an impressive career at one of the top financial consulting firms in Manhattan, climbing up the ranks from intern to senior consultant in record time. Her success was partly due to her razor-sharp analytical mind, but also because Ebony had a way of winning people over with grace and persistence. When the higher-ups recognized her potential, they offered her opportunities that had never before been bestowed on someone so young in the company. With that recognition came perks: a large salary, invitations to prestigious galas, membership in exclusive clubs, and the kind of airline status that opened doors and conjured immediate respect. She often traveled for work, zipping between cities to attend high-stakes meetings. It was on these travels that Ebony realized how differently people in the upper echelons of society were treated. A sense of guilt and confusion usually tugged at her whenever she found herself in a luxurious lounge, sipping complimentary champagne while others waited in uncomfortable chairs at the main gate. But she justified it by reminding herself that she had worked for every single advantage she now possessed. On a chilly December morning, Ebony arrived at John F. Kennedy International Airport for a flight to Los Angeles. She was attending a conference organized by the philanthropic branch of her firm to discuss youth entrepreneurship programs on the West Coast. Ebony was slated to be a keynote speaker. Though she never liked to label herself as someone who made it, since she believed she still had miles to go, she could not deny she had come far indeed. From that cramped apartment in Brooklyn to the red carpet of lavish events, Ebony's trajectory had been one of unstoppable progress. The night before, she barely slept, working late to finalize her speech. The speech included stories from her childhood, anecdotes that highlighted how crucial it was for marginalized youth to be given a chance to thrive. She hoped to inspire her audience to invest in the dreams of children who resembled the girl she used to be. Arriving at Terminal 4, Ebony felt that unmistakable buzz of controlled chaos. She had her carry-on, a neat black roller bag that bore the marks of thousands of miles traveled, and a sleek briefcase containing her laptop and final notes. Because she had top-tier VIP status with Delta Airlines' Delta Diamond Medallion, she bypassed the regular baggage check line and headed toward the dedicated priority counter. Her day had been meticulously planned. She would breeze through check-in, maybe grab a quick latte at the lounge, then head to the gate. The flight would be 5.5 hours, during which she could finalize her presentation slides. Everything seemed straightforward. At the priority counter, Ebony was greeted warmly by an older gentleman named Tim. He'd been working at the airline for decades, and Ebony could see in his eyes that he understood what it took to make a customer feel valued. He confirmed her seat in first class, took her bag with care, and wished her a lovely flight. The small gestures, she thought, were what made a difference. It reminded her why she chose loyalty to this airline in the first place, not just for the miles or the upgrades, but for the genuine kindness she encountered from dedicated employees like Tim. Security was relatively quick, thanks to her TSA pre-check. She walked confidently in her tailored burgundy pantsuit and black heels, her hair neatly styled in braids. She often liked to wear braids on business trips. They felt low maintenance yet elegant. She passed countless travelers rushing to their gates, realized she still had time to spare, and decided to head to the Delta Sky Club lounge. Ebony scanned her digital membership card at the lounge entrance, and the attendant, a polite young man, greeted her with a bright smile. Moments later, she was seated in a comfortable chair by the large glass windows, sipping a cappuccino and watching planes take off into the overcast sky. She scrolled through her phone to check her emails, responding to a flurry of messages from colleagues about her upcoming keynote. The hum of conversation in the lounge was soothing. Business people, vacationers, and couples were going about their lives, each with a story to tell. Ebony couldn't help but observe the wide demographic. This lounge, she thought, was a bubble. Everyone in it had some measure of privilege. Often, Ebony wondered how many other black women in particular had made it here. She thought about the quiet stares she sometimes received, and she reminded herself that she did deserve her seat in this lounge. She'd paid her dues in sweat and perseverance. Time eventually nudged her to gather her belongings. Her flight would begin boarding soon. The gate for her flight, Delta 416, was about a 3-minute walk from the lounge. As she approached, she saw a small crowd forming. They were announcing the different zones, pre-boarding for special assistance, then the Delta One and Sky Priority passengers. Ebony retrieved her boarding pass from her phone, preparing to line up in her rightful group. It was then that she caught sight of the gate agent. Her name tag read Monica. Monica had a stern face and sharp eyes that flickered over each passenger's appearance in a way that made Ebony bristle. Ebony stepped forward, smiling politely. "Good morning," she said, handing over her boarding pass. Monica frowned at Ebony, then looked at the pass, then back at Ebony. "Ma'am," Monica said with a clipped tone, "this is a first-class boarding pass." Ebony offered a curt nod. "Yes, that's correct. 2A. Monica's eyes narrowed. She leaned in as if talking to a child who had broken the rules. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This line is for first-class passengers and Diamond Medallion members." Ebony felt a flush of annoyance. "I am a Diamond Medallion member. Here's my ID," she replied, pulling out her frequent flyer card from her wallet, though she rarely needed to do this in person. Usually, the digital boarding pass was enough proof of her status. Monica took the card as though it might be fake. She scrutinized it for a moment, her expression not softening in the least. Ebony heard the subtle shift in Monica's voice, a slight hush, as if she didn't want to make a scene but wanted Ebony to know she was onto her. "Delta Diamond Medallion, huh?" she repeated with skepticism. Ebony suppressed a flare of anger. She didn't want a confrontation, especially not over something so demeaning. She tried to stay calm. "Yes, ma'am, I earned it." A few passengers in line behind Ebony began to murmur, growing curious about the hold-up. Ebony could feel the weight of their stares. She wanted nothing more than to board the plane peacefully and get on with her day. Monica, however, seemed determined to prove Ebony didn't belong. Finally, Monica handed back the card. Her words came out in a low, embittered hiss. "Listen, I'm not sure how you got this, but first class isn't for people like you." For a second, Ebony simply couldn't process what she'd just heard. A chill went down her spine. Her gaze snapped up to meet Monica's. "I beg your pardon?" Ebony said. voice trembling slightly. She could hardly contain the roiling anger she felt. Monica seemed to realize she might have gone too far. She tensed but doubled down. I see people trying to sneak into the premium cabins all the time. You can't just waltz in here because you printed off some fancy pass. This is a serious offense. I could call security. Ebony took a deep breath. She refused to drop her gaze, though tears of frustration threatened. "Call them," she said, quietly, deciding that if Monica was intent on humiliating her, Ebony would let the authorities settle this. She wasn't afraid she was outraged. Before things escalated further, another gate agent approached. His name tag read Carlos. He had a concerned expression. "Is there a problem, Monica?" he asked, scanning Ebony and reading the tension in the air. "Not at all," Monica said, turning her face away from Ebony. "This passenger claims to have a diamond medallion and a first-class seat. I was just verifying." Carlos looked at Ebony's boarding pass, scanned it on the machine, and it beeped approvingly. "Everything checks out here," he said, sounding exasperated. Then he turned to Ebony, offering a professional smile. "Welcome aboard, Miss Brown. Sorry for the delay." Ebony nodded in thanks, not wanting to waste another breath on Monica. Still, as she proceeded down the jet bridge, Monica's words rang in her mind. "People like you." The humiliation burned her cheeks. She was used to microaggressions, but the gate agent's brazen hostility had crossed a new line. Once on the plane, Ebony managed to restore her calm facade. She found her seat in 2A and stored her carry-on in the overhead bin. She settled into the plush seat, wanting to exhale the tension. She reminded herself, "You are here because you belong here. You earned this seat." She didn't want to let one bigoted gate agent ruin her mood, but it was hard to shake off. The flight attendant working the first-class cabin was a tall woman named Clarissa, with silver-streaked hair neatly pulled into a bun. She exuded a certain warmth that instantly put Ebony at ease. Clarissa offered her a glass of orange juice or champagne, and Ebony chose champagne. Figuring she could use a bit of fizz to settle her nerves, she sipped slowly, gaze drifting around the cabin. The other first-class passengers were mostly business travelers, men in suits, a couple of them glued to their laptops. One was a middle-aged woman wearing noise-cancelling headphones, flipping through a gossip magazine. Nobody seemed to pay Ebony any particular attention, or so she thought. Moments later, Ebony felt a slight nudge against her armrest. She turned to see a well-dressed woman with piercing blue eyes. She looked to be in her mid-40s, with a stylish bob haircut and a manner of wearing her tailored blouse that suggested she, too, was a seasoned professional. Her name tag from a conference badge hung around her neck, revealing her name, Vivian Locke. Ebony noticed that Vivian was studying her carefully. Ebony managed a polite smile, expecting just a casual greeting. But Vivian's gaze was too probing, as if she was evaluating Ebony's entire existence. Ebony tried to brush it off. Just then, Clarissa came by with a tray of warm towels. Ebony took one. Vivian declined, but as Clarissa moved on, Vivian said quietly, "I saw what happened at the gate." Ebony's hand tightened around the towel, but she kept her voice neutral. "Oh, it was quite the scene," Vivian nodded. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. I don't know the details, but it looked unpleasant." Ebony nodded but was wary. People sometimes pretended to be allies, only to ask intrusive questions or make belittling comments. She waited to see what angle Vivian might take. "I've been flying Delta for years," Vivian continued. "I hate seeing that kind of attitude. You'd think in this day and age we'd be past all that." Ebony gave a light shrug. "Yes, one would think." She tried to offer a tight smile. "Thank you for your concern." Vivian seemed to want to continue the conversation, but Ebony turned her attention to her phone, plugging in some last-minute edits to her keynote slides. A few minutes later, the captain announced that they'd be closing the doors soon and preparing for departure. Ebony's mind flicked back to the gate agent. She wondered if Monica was even now telling some story to her colleagues, twisting the narrative. Ebony tried to shake it off, determined not to let negativity overshadow the rest of her day. As the plane taxied out onto the runway, Ebony felt a stirring in her chest. She thought of her mother, who had taken Ebony to the airport once, years ago, when Ebony won a local essay contest that earned her a free trip to Washington, D.C. Her mother had never flown on a plane herself, but had insisted Ebony go, telling her, "Spread those wings, baby girl." Ebony had never forgotten that awe-inspiring moment of the plane roaring down the runway and lifting into the sky. It was a sensation of limitless possibilities. She felt it again now, even though she was older, more jaded, and carrying the weight of a real job and adult responsibilities. Flight always awakened hope in her. About half an hour into the flight, Clarissa returned to take orders for lunch. Ebony requested the grilled salmon, a dish she'd had before on Delta, and it was usually pretty good for airplane food. As Clarissa moved down the aisle, Ebony could sense Vivian shifting again, angling toward her. Ebony couldn't ignore it any longer. "You on a business trip?" Vivian asked softly. Ebony nodded. "Yes, heading out to La for a conference. It's part of my job." She tried to keep her response short, not quite ready for a heart-to-heart. Vivian seemed unperturbed by Ebony's brevity. "Same here. I'm in pharmaceuticals. There's a big industry event in Los Angeles next week. But I like to go out a bit early to meet some contacts, do some wine and dine, that sort of thing." Ebony gave a polite nod. "Makes sense. Where's your event being held? The Los Angeles Convention Center? Yours?" Ebony paused. "I'll be speaking at a philanthropic conference at the J.W. Marriott near LALIV. She tried not to let her frustration from earlier seep into her tone. "We're discussing youth entrepreneurship." Vivian's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. Good cause." She rummaged through the side pocket of her seat and pulled out a business card. "In case you ever need any sponsorship or want to connect with some interesting folks in my circle, feel free to reach out." Ebony thanked her, taking the card more out of courtesy than genuine interest. She was still a bit guarded but appreciated the gesture. Eventually, Clarissa returned with the appetizer trays, and Ebony immersed herself in the meal. The conversation with Vivian stalled, which Ebony welcomed. She flipped open her laptop to practice her speech, running through lines in her head about empowerment, about not letting stereotypes hold you back. She thought about what had just happened at the gate. It was as if fate had handed her a fresh example of the bigotry that still existed. Ebony was tempted to incorporate the incident into her speech somehow, but that would probably be too raw, too personal. Besides, she needed to keep her keynote polished and professional. The flight progressed smoothly for the next couple of hours. Ebony answered some emails, read over a contract for an upcoming partnership, and occasionally gazed out the window at the expansive sky. She tried not to dwell on Monica's words. As she settled into her seat, Ebony noticed Clarissa passing by and pausing at her row. "Miss Brown," Clarissa said in a low voice, leaning in. "If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to ask. I was at the boarding door for a moment and overheard a bit. I just want you to know we appreciate your business." Ebony caught the sincerity in Clarissa's tone. She nodded. "Thank you, Clarissa. The first do appreciate that." The rest of the flight was uneventful. Eventually, Ebony dozed off, lulled by the hum of the engines. She dreamed fleetingly visions of her mother, of her younger self packing for that first plane ride. When she woke, the captain was announcing their descent into LAX. The flight attendants came around to collect any trash and remind passengers to stow their belongings. Ebony felt the dryness in her eyes that came from sleeping on planes, but otherwise she felt a stirring excitement. She had a lot to accomplish on this trip. When the wheels touched down and the plane taxied to the gate, Ebony tried not to think about the possibility of crossing paths with Monica again. But she couldn't help the coil of tension in her gut. She needed to exit the plane, find her driver, and get to the conference hotel for a quick rehearsal of her keynote in the afternoon. She might never see Monica again, she told herself. Perhaps that was for the best. As Ebony stepped off the plane, she followed the flow of first-class passengers up the ramp. The moment she entered the terminal, she heard a voice say, "Miss Brown." She turned to see a uniformed Delta representative waiting near the arrival gate area. He was a young man with short blonde hair and a wide, forced smile. "Miss Brown?" he repeated, stepping forward. "Yes," Ebony said, adjusting the handle of her carry-on. "Could you come with me, please? There's a matter the airline would like to discuss." Ebony's pulse quickened. Her first thought was that something had gone wrong with her baggage, or there was an issue with her connecting flight details. Though she wasn't connecting, she might have left something behind. She followed the representative down a corridor that led away from the main passenger flow. She became vaguely aware of Vivian's presence behind her. It seemed Vivian, too, was curious, as if wanting to see if Ebony needed any help. In a small side office with frosted glass windows, Ebony was greeted by a middle-aged woman in a crisp business suit. She had an air of officialdom about her, with a name badge that read Karen H., Customer Service Supervisor. Ebony tried not to read too much into the name Karen, but the irony was not lost on her. "Miss Brown, I'm Karen. Thank you for stopping by. May I offer you a seat?" Karen gestured to a small conference table. Ebony sat, crossing her legs and placing her carry-on beside her. The representative stood by the door, looking uncomfortable. "Is there an issue with my bag?" Ebony asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Karen folded her hands on the table. "Not exactly. We received a report from the gate agent at JFK Monica. If I'm not mistaken, alleging there was some altercation regarding your ticket status. She suggested that you presented fraudulent documentation to gain access to first class." Ebony felt a jolt of anger. She inhaled carefully, then let her words come out crisp and measured. "I presented a legitimate boarding pass and a legitimate Diamond Medallion membership card. She was the one who questioned my right to be in first class. I told her to call security if she doubted me. She didn't, so I boarded." Karen nodded slowly. "I see. The gate agent claimed you made threats about complaining to upper management and that you verbally harassed her." Ebony's jaw clenched. "That is absolutely false. In fact, she told me, first class isn't for people like you. If you have surveillance or audio recordings, you'll find that she was the aggressor." I simply stood my ground. Karen's posture stiffened. Ebony could sense that Karen was used to dealing with complaints, but perhaps not used to dealing with them when the passenger had a clear advantage in membership status. "We do take accusations of discrimination very seriously," Karen began in a measured tone. "However, we also trust our employees," Ebony cut in, her frustration boiling over. "Do you trust them more than a Diamond Medallion passenger, more than your loyal customer who has spent tens of thousands of dollars on your airline? Are you going to ignore the fact that she specifically singled me out because I'm a black woman?" Ebony's voice trembled slightly on the last words, but she refused to be embarrassed by her emotions. Karen looked taken aback, perhaps by Ebony's directness. "I understand your frustration. We will open an investigation. For now, we're just gathering your statement. Could you provide a written account?" Ebony sighed, glancing at her watch. She had a schedule to keep, but she wasn't about to let them twist the narrative. "Fine. I'll give you my account, but let me be clear, I expect Delta to address this matter properly. If this is swept under the rug, I will take it further. I'm an executive at a major consulting firm, and I know how to escalate these issues. I also have connections in media. Discrimination is not something I take lightly." Karen pressed her lips together, possibly weighing how to handle Ebony's words. "I see. We certainly don't want this to escalate unnecessarily. Here's a form. Please fill out as many details as possible. She slid a paper and pen across the table. We will conduct interviews with all parties involved. Ebony began writing. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to be precise, noting Monica's exact words and the presence of onlookers. She also mentioned Carlos, the other gate agent, who had confirmed her boarding pass without issue. After a few minutes, Ebony handed the form back. Karen skimmed it, then offered Ebony a practiced corporate smile. "Thank you for your cooperation, Miss Brown. We'll be in touch. If you have any additional concerns, here's my card." Ebony stood, slipping the business card into her wallet. "Thank you. I have to go now. I have obligations in LA." As she exited the office, Ebony spotted Vivian standing not too far away. Vivian's expression was tense with concern. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. Ebony nodded. "Yes. They just wanted my statement about the incident." She glanced around, noticing that other passengers had long since dispersed. She suspected that none of them, if asked, would side with Monica's story. But Ebony had a life to get on with, so she gave Vivian a small wave goodbye and headed to the baggage claim. A short while later, Ebony found herself in a sleek black SUV courtesy of her firm's travel department, weaving through LAX traffic. She stared out the window at the palm trees and the haze of Los Angeles. The memory of Monica's hateful comment lingered, overshadowing Ebony's excitement for the conference. She resolved not to let it hamper her performance. Instead, she decided to harness that anger, to weave it into her speech as a testament to the obstacles she and others like her still faced. She might not name the airline or the specific incident, but she could speak about perseverance in the face of adversity. She would transform her frustration into something constructive. At the JW Marriott, Ebony was greeted by a flurry of event organizers, each vying for a moment of her time. She politely navigated the chaos, checking into her room, then heading straight to the conference auditorium to test the AV equipment. The next day, she'd be standing on that stage in front of hundreds of philanthropists and corporate sponsors, making a case for investing in young dreamers from marginalized communities. That afternoon, Ebony rehearsed her keynote with the event coordinator, a soft-spoken woman named Monica, an ironic twist. Ebony tried not to let the name association rattle her. This Monica was quite kind and professional. After the run-through, Ebony retreated to her hotel room to refine a few lines. She couldn't help but think about how life placed you in front of people who shared the same name, yet treated you in starkly different ways. It was a reminder that one bad seed didn't define an entire orchard. As night fell, Ebony sank into the plush bed, exhaustion seeping through her limbs. She stared at the city lights outside her window, the glow of Los Angeles shining brilliantly. Her phone buzzed a text from her mother. She'd told her mother about the incident at JFK, venting her anger. Her mother's response was simple: "You keep shining, baby. Don't let nobody snatch your light." Ebony smiled at the words on her screen. Comfort washed over her. She thought about how many times her mother's unwavering belief in her had been her lifeline. Morning arrived, and with it came the swirl of pre-conference adrenaline. Ebony made her way down to the main ballroom, passing a table of name badges for attendees. She recognized many influential figures in philanthropy and business. She took a seat at a reserved table near the stage, finalizing some bullet points. The room began to fill. People greeted her. Some recognized her from previous conferences. Others approached her with curiosity. Ebony answered politely, though her nerves were alive and dancing. When her time came to speak, Ebony walked onto the stage, a polished microphone clipped to her lapel. A hush fell over the crowd of about 500. Ebony inhaled, looked out over the sea of faces diverse, but still with too few women of color in the front rows, and began. She talked about her upbringing in Brooklyn, about how the local community center and a few caring mentors had steered her away from negative influences, fostering her spark. She touched upon success, resilience, and the need for society to invest in youth. Her tone was confident, her smile genuine. Then she pivoted slightly, referencing a recent personal experience without going into specifics. There are times we all face prejudice or dismissal, even in places we rightfully belong, Ebony said, her voice steady. Someone might say to you, this space isn't for people like you, but it's up to us, those who've walked these precarious bridges, to stand our ground. It's up to us to ensure the next generation doesn't have to hear those words. She saw a few heads nodding in the audience. Perhaps they sensed the weight behind her words. She ended her speech to robust applause. Amid the standing ovation, Ebony felt a wave of relief, as if she'd let go of a burden. She had turned a painful memory into a message that could uplift others. During the post-speech reception, Ebony was bombarded by well-wishers. She smiled, shook hands, and politely accepted compliments. Some expressed their admiration for her perseverance. Others asked how they could support the youth program she championed. A few recognized the subtle reference to discrimination in her talk and congratulated her for addressing the elephant in the room. Ebony was grateful for the moment. On the second day of the conference, Ebony was approached by a representative from Delta's corporate office. The woman introduced herself as Helen Chambers, Director of Customer Relations. Ebony raised an eyebrow, curious. She wondered if this meeting was related to the incident at JFK. Miss Brown, Helen said, extending a business card, I'd like to speak with you about your recent experience on Flight 416. Could we sit down for a moment? Ebony agreed, leading Helen to a quieter corner near the conference coffee station. Helen looked apologetic. First, let me say we're deeply sorry for what happened at JFK. We've completed an initial investigation, and it appears that the gate agent you encountered, Monica, has had previous complaints filed against her regarding unprofessional conduct. This is not the standard Delta wants to uphold. Ebony felt a flicker of satisfaction. So Monica had a record of this kind of behavior. I'm not surprised. And, Helen sighed, Monica has been placed on administrative leave pending further review. We want you to know that we take these accusations seriously and we've found enough evidence to believe your account. Furthermore, we've interviewed Carlos, who corroborated your story. We also reviewed security footage and audio from the gate area. We can hear part of the exchange you described. Ebony, let that sink in. And what steps are being taken to ensure this doesn't happen again to someone else? Helen looked earnest. We're launching an internal training initiative to emphasize anti-discrimination policies. We'd also like to invite you to a meeting with our executive team to discuss how we can better serve our diverse customers. I know this is short notice, but we'd appreciate your input. Ebony mulled it over, bitterness still lingering. She was grateful that Delta seemed to be addressing the situation, but she wanted more than corporate lip service. I'll consider it, Ebony said carefully. I appreciate the apology and the steps you're taking, but a few training sessions might not solve everything. Helen nodded. We understand, and I hope we can keep an open line of communication. With that, Helen left Ebony with a promise to follow up soon. Ebony returned to the conference sessions, her mind abuzz. She tried to focus on the next speaker, discussing technology's role in youth empowerment, but she couldn't shake the swirl of thoughts about her meeting with Helen. She felt a mixture of vindication. Monica wouldn't just walk away from this unscathed, and a sense of guarded optimism. Maybe the incident would spark meaningful change within the airline's culture. Or maybe it would all blow over once the media cycle shifted. Ebony vowed that if Delta didn't follow through, she would make some noise. That evening, Ebony's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, not recognizing the number, but answered anyway. "Hello, Miss Brown," came a deep, resonant voice. "My name is Russell Coleman. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Delta Airlines. Helen Chambers told me she spoke with you earlier. Would you be available to meet tomorrow for lunch?" We'd like to discuss some potential collaborative efforts regarding diversity and inclusion training for our staff. Ebony was taken aback. She had expected maybe an email, not a personal call from a VP. She hesitated, then checked her schedule. I have a panel in the morning, but I'm free around one. Perfect, Russell said. We can send a car or meet wherever is most convenient for you. We want to make this as easy as possible. Please know that we consider your perspective extremely valuable. When Ebony hung up, she couldn't help but recall the beginning of this trip, how she'd started the journey on a note of blatant discrimination. Now, a top airline executive was eager to collaborate on improving their policies. The irony was thick. If Monica had been polite, if she hadn't said those hateful words, none of this might have happened. Ebony wondered if the gate agent had any inkling that her cruelty would trigger a chain of events this big. The next day, Ebony was whisked away from the conference by a driver and taken to a chic restaurant in downtown La. Russell Coleman stood outside, tall and imposing in a charcoal suit. He greeted Ebony warmly, holding the door open as they entered. Over a meal of fresh pasta and salad, Russell laid out Delta's hopes to create a training program for gate agents and flight attendants focusing on unconscious bias, inclusivity, and conflict resolution. Ebony listened intently. We've had initiatives before, Russell admitted, but obviously they need strengthening. We'd like your firm's help in designing a robust module, maybe even a video series, or an in-person workshop. We're willing to invest in this because we see how an incident like this can tarnish the relationship with our loyal customers, and it's simply the right thing to do. Ebony recognized an opportunity, not only for her firm, but for the broader cause she championed. If Delta was serious, they could become a model for other airlines and large corporations. She was also mindful of the risk. Ebony didn't want this to be a simple PR stunt where they trotted her out as a token. I'm open to discussing possibilities, she said, sipping her water. But I want transparency and a real commitment. You can't fix a systemic issue overnight. And this can't just be about your brand image. It has to be about actual culture change. Russell nodded, clasping his hands. We mean it, Miss Brown. I'm prepared to sign and moo to that effect, and we can proceed with a pilot program. We'd love for you to be an advisor. Ebony felt a surge of pride tempered by caution. Let's have our legal teams draft something. I'll see if we can arrange a meeting once I'm back in New York. For now, I'm willing to see where this leads. They parted with handshakes, and Ebony returned to the conference. She was slated to moderate a panel on corporate giving that afternoon, and she did so with poise. Afterward, she couldn't help but reflect on the swirl of events that had pulled her life in unexpected directions. On the final day of the conference, Ebony was walking through the hotel lobby when she spotted a familiar face, Vivian, the woman from the plane. Vivian was engaged in conversation with a cluster of people by the coffee station. When she spotted Ebony, she broke away and hurried over, looking excited. Ebony, she said with genuine warmth, I've been hoping I'd run into you. I actually saw an article in the local news about a gate agent at Delta being put on administrative leave for discriminatory behavior. It didn't mention names, but I wondered if it was the same incident. Ebony smiled ruefully. Word travels fast, huh? Yes, that's the one. Vivian pursed her lips. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad it's being addressed. Any good news on that front? Ebony hesitated, then decided to share a bit. I'm in talks with Delta's senior staff about consulting on a new training program. It could lead to broader policy changes. Vivian's eyes lit up. That's fantastic. If you need any support, let me know. I know some folks at a national equity nonprofit could help with content or rollout. Ebony took Vivian's card again, genuinely touched. I might reach out, thank you. They chatted briefly about the conference, and Ebony realized that sometimes allies came in unexpected forms. Vivian's initial intense stare on the plane might have just been curiosity. People were multi-layered, Ebony reminded herself. She'd been so guarded, but sometimes people genuinely wanted to help. Before flying back to New York, Ebony gave a stirring final address at the conference. She shared more personal anecdotes, focusing on the importance of representation in leadership positions. The crowd responded with a standing ovation. Ebony felt a sense of fulfillment, mingled with a bright optimism. It wasn't just about her personal victory over Monica's prejudice, it was the collective impact these kinds of stories could have on shaping future policies and perceptions. As Ebony made her way to LAX for her return flight, she couldn't help a swell of anticipation. She was still a bit on edge about encountering any staff who might hold a grudge. But upon arriving at the first-class check-in, she was greeted by an impeccably courteous agent who recognized her diamond medallion status instantly, printed her boarding pass, and wished her a pleasant flight. Ebony thanked him warmly. In the Delta Sky Club, Ebony helped herself to a small plate of fruit and a cup of tea. She noticed an email on her phone from Russell Coleman, referencing an upcoming meeting in New York. They wanted her to present a preliminary proposal in 2 weeks. Ebony's thoughts roamed to how swiftly life could shift from painful confrontation to a potential partnership that might better the experiences of countless travelers. She boarded her flight this time with no issues and settled into her seat. The flight attendant in first class was extremely attentive, offering Ebony an assortment of beverages and a blanket before she even asked. Ebony sensed that word might have spread among some staff about her experience, or perhaps she was simply noticing their usual courtesy more keenly. Either way, she appreciated the gestures without letting them cloud her judgment. When the plane took off, Ebony leaned back in her seat, gazing out the window. The sunlight glimmered across the clouds. She reflected on the chain of events, Monica's cruel words, Ebony's refusal to back down, the corporate response, and now a potential initiative that could transform how an entire airline approached customer service and diversity training. She also thought about the broader lesson sometimes. In the face of injustice, standing up for oneself could spark change that went beyond personal vindication. Of course, Ebony knew that karma was a concept people brandished to make sense of fairness. In her mind, what happened to Monica wasn't just karma, it was the natural consequence of sustained unprofessional and discriminatory conduct. She also acknowledged that it often took someone with Ebony's clout, a high-status passenger with professional influence, to push for accountability that might otherwise never come. This realization only fueled Ebony's determination to fight for those who might be disregarded because they lacked the same social or economic leverage. Upon landing back in New York, Ebony's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues. Word had spread in her firm about her involvement with Delta's corporate affairs team. Some applauded her, others teased about Ebony possibly becoming the face of airline equity. Ebony took it in stride, focusing on the work to be done. Over the next 2 weeks, Ebony met with her firm's diversity and inclusion specialists, brainstorming an approach that combined empathy training, practical conflict resolution, and continuous accountability measures for airline staff. She pored over case studies from other corporations that had tackled bias, gleaning insights into what worked and what didn't. The goal was to create a pilot program that Delta could roll out at a handful of major airports before expanding nationwide. She insisted that employees like Monica, if they remained with the airline after appropriate consequences, should undergo specialized coaching. Ebony believed in second chances, provided there was genuine commitment to change. Finally, the day arrived for Ebony's big meeting at Delta's corporate offices in Atlanta. She flew down the night before, checked into a hotel near the airport, and spent the evening fine-tuning her presentation slides. Early the next morning, Ebony sat in a sleek conference room with a view of the bustling tarmac. Across the table were Russell Coleman, Helen Chambers, and several other executives. Their faces ranged from earnest excitement to skeptical curiosity. Ebony launched into her presentation, a comprehensive plan that included online modules, in-person workshops, role-playing scenarios, and a system for ongoing feedback from passengers and staff. She emphasized that the key was consistency, accountability, and a top-down commitment from Delta's leadership. When Ebony finished, the room was silent for a moment. She felt a rush of nerves. But then Russell leaned forward, smiling broadly. "Miss Brown, this is exactly the kind of forward-thinking approach we need. It's not going to be cheap or easy to implement, but I believe it's necessary." Helen nodded in agreement. "We can allocate resources for a pilot program at JFK, LAX, and Hartsfield-Jackson here in Atlanta to start. If that goes well, we'll roll out further." One of the executives, an older man with steel grey hair, added, "Miss Brown, you mentioned you are also heavily involved in philanthropic efforts. Would you be open to tying in some form of community engagement? We could incorporate stories from underrepresented youth to illustrate the impact of biases." Ebony's heart soared. It was the kind of synergy she'd hoped for. "Absolutely. I have connections with non-profits that mentor young people. Including their perspectives could drive home the real-world consequences of discrimination." They spent the next hour hashing out details, discussing timelines, budgets, and communication strategies. By the end, Ebony felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything else in her career. She'd been a successful consultant on many big projects, but this initiative felt personal and transformative. It wasn't just about flight upgrades or corporate status. It was about people's dignity. After the meeting, Russell pulled Ebony aside. "We're also considering a public statement," he said. "We want to show the world we're taking a stand against discrimination. Would you be willing to be part of that announcement?" Ebony hesitated, recalling how she never enjoyed the spotlight for personal issues. But in this case, maybe visibility was necessary to drive home the message. "I'll do it, provided it's respectful and honest," she said. "I don't want it to look like I'm just a prop in a PR campaign." Russell nodded. "Understood. We'll work closely with you on the wording. Delta is serious about this, Miss Brown, and we have you to thank for pushing us out of our comfort zone." Ebony gave a grateful smile. "I appreciate the opportunity to effect real change." In the weeks and months that followed, Ebony's plan began taking shape. Managers from the pilot airports were trained first, then frontline staff underwent sessions. Some employees resisted at first, but gradually, as they saw the airline's leadership fully behind the effort, they began to embrace the training. Anonymous surveys reflected a positive shift in the workplace culture. Customer feedback improved as well. Reports of discriminatory treatment decreased. Ebony monitored these metrics carefully, providing ongoing recommendations. Meanwhile, Ebony's own career soared even higher. Her firm recognized her as a trailblazer. She was featured in an industry magazine for her role in implementing large-scale DEI diversity, equity, and inclusion reforms in a major airline. She even found herself in demand as a speaker at events beyond her usual finance circles. She talked about bridging corporate interests and social responsibility, using the anecdote of how she'd been told, "First class isn't for people like you," to illustrate both the severity of bias and the power of standing up to it. What happened to Monica, the gate agent? Ebony learned through Delta's channels that after being placed on administrative leave, Monica had her contract terminated. The review board had discovered multiple instances of misconduct. Monica reportedly tried to defend herself, claiming Ebony had provoked her, but the evidence, video footage, and witness testimonies contradicted her assertions. Ebony felt no personal vindictiveness, but she believed accountability was necessary. Perhaps Monica would learn and change, perhaps not. Either way, Ebony would not lose any sleep over it. In a twist Ebony hadn't anticipated, news outlets got wind of the story. A journalist from the New York Times approached Ebony for comment. At first, Ebony was reluctant to share details, but Delta encouraged an interview to showcase their new program. Ebony agreed, under the condition that the article focused on solutions rather than sensationalizing the problem. The resulting piece was balanced. It delved into Ebony's personal encounter, the airline's response, and the broader implications for corporate America. It garnered a massive reaction on social media, praise, debate, even a few detractors who insisted Ebony must have exaggerated the incident. But Ebony was no stranger to online trolls. She let her actions speak louder than the skepticism. Months later, Ebony was flying again, this time to Seattle for a tech summit. She boarded the plane as usual, using her diamond medallion privileges. No stares, no doubts, no confrontation. The gate agent scanned her boarding pass with a friendly smile, no questions asked. Ebony settled into seat 2A, feeling at peace. In many ways, that was what she'd wanted all along, the right to travel without her identity being weaponized against her. Yet Ebony knew that, for countless others, discrimination in its myriad forms persisted. Her victory, while meaningful, was but a single battle in a sprawling war. Still, if one airline could pivot its culture, if one corporation could set a precedent, Ebony believed it could ripple outward. She recalled the phrase she had used in one of her speeches, "A small change in a vast sky might guide the flight path of many." She pulled out her laptop, ready to fine-tune more projects. Her phone buzzed with a notification, an email from Delta's Diversity Committee, inviting her to the official rollout event of the new training initiative, now named Skybridge, Building Connections at Every Altitude. Ebony smiled, tucking away her phone. The sense of fulfillment warmed her heart. Life had a strange way of weaving adversity into opportunity. As the plane's engines revved up for takeoff, Ebony gazed out the window once more, the horizon stretching before her like an open invitation. Ebony Brown's experience reminds us that a single act of courage can spark transformative change far beyond our own personal realm. From being told first class isn't for people like you to partnering with a major airline on a pioneering diversity initiative, Ebony's journey showcases the power of resilience and unwavering determination. Each of us has the capacity to challenge prejudice and carve a path for others to follow, no matter how steep the climb or how long the odds. If you've been moved by this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share it far and wide, and subscribe to this channel for more tales of triumph, justice, and hope. Together, we can bring attention to stories that inspire real, lasting change. Be part of this community, and let's keep shining a light on voices that deserve to be heard.